the Ceres principles, that they use that for their principles. And I'd be quite interested to know how they use that, because I don't know that generally companies do in their principles, which leads into their value statements, actually use this. I was a bit surprised when they mentioned that. So you see, by going through this 15-point program, that you can actually evaluate a company's strategy very much as you did with, if you've done it, the critics questionnaire, where you can go on the website and you get an idea of how good the company is. This applies to the country as a whole, not necessarily to specifically companies. What happened is that the ILO worked with somebody called the OECD. You've heard of the OECD? It's actually called the Rich Man's Club. It's 15 rich countries, Japan, all the European countries, US, and so on. And they've come up with a set of principles for multinational corporations. And I don't know if companies are really using this. The OECD says they do. They're quite complex. In fact, there's a little story with that, because in the mid-70s, when the ILO came up with multinational principles, which actually went into the OECD ones, I was at a conference where that was being done, and I was working on basic needs. Now, the ILO conventions at that time on multinationals, they couldn't get any agreement. The Americans were really against it. India was really against it. So what they did at midnight, in order to get agreement, they stopped the clock. And so these tripartite principles, now multinational principles, came on the statute books, well, the ILO statute books, and have passed into the OECD laws. Now, I've been looking at that with interest. Some of that has leaked over into what the EU's doing. I told you they're all a gang of thieves. Not really thieves. I think people are trying to do what they think is right, but sometimes the bureaucracy gets stultified. So when you're looking at these research, where do you go? Where do you prioritize? And me as an advisor would suggest just a limited number, but other people would suggest other things. And then since then, there's ISO 26000, which has crept along, which is kind of a bit difficult to get hold of. ISO 26000 in many ways has captured all these. And if you look on the web, there's actually on LinkedIn, there's a discussion on ISO 26000 by some British economist, this one that you know quite well, who said, aren't these a little bit heavy for small and medium-sized companies? So that's led to pages and hours of discussion on it. And I won out in the end. People have agreed. So we've come up with a limited set of conditions for small and medium-sized countries. I've got a copy of that if anybody wants it. Okay, so that's research. Then identify 7 your CSR strategy for each stakeholder. And of course it's going to be different from company to company, sector to sector. And how do you identify your strategy? Well, now you're getting some elements of what is meant by strategy, so it's a similar sort of process that you would go through. And so you start thinking, what are we going to do? And now by this time, hello, your budget has got a little bit bigger, it's getting a little bit more complicated. So you're going to have to revise your budget accordingly. And then to carry out stakeholder dialogue. One of my colleagues in CSRFI does a workshop on stakeholder dialogue, on how to go about it. A guy called Adrian Henriquez. If you Google him on the website, you'll find him. He's written a number of books on stakeholder dialogue. He's a pretty prominent author on his own blog and including for some national newspapers on stakeholder dialogue. But he doesn't do very much on survey analysis. So let me just do a little digression, if I may.
Do the stakeholders have the final say, or is a kind of a...
Not really. In the end, it's really still top down. The thing is, there are many stakeholders. If you have your board members and stakeholders,
everyone has a different opinion.
It's a little bit easier than if the stakeholders are your consumers. And so then what you would do is to use a number of techniques. Shell use something called Tell Shell on their website. But NGOs got hold of it and inundated it with a request and paralyzed the damn website. I got hundreds of thousands of hits, they couldn't handle it. So they had to actually cancel their whole website. And the best way of doing it is through survey techniques. I haven't gone into that in a way, but when you do a survey technique, make sure you test your questionnaire. Make sure the questionnaires are as clear as possible. Try and use multiple choice. You saw an example of multiple choice. It's much easier to analyze. You see how quickly we could analyze my 25 question questionnaire. If it's not multiple choice and is open-ended, horribly difficult to analyze. Even with 20 responses, if you've got 2,000, impossible. You can't. So that's one statement. So try and use simple questions and multiple choice. And the next thing is, how do you identify your stakeholders? Well, normally in statistics, we need a population. If we're going to do a sample, a random sample, and normally what we use is a census, or a census of all companies. But if it's your own company, you're not going to have a census of customers, but your market research department will have a pretty good idea of the population that you're looking at. So you can work with them on that and choose a sample. But there's also quick and dirty methods that people use, because even just interviewing some is better than none. And quite often people might just get half a dozen together in a room, they call it a focus group, and they would just say, well, you represent those bastards over there, excuse my French. I don't often use the expression over there. And they would stratify it in some way. Then, once you've done all this, you want to try and measure progress. Now you can see by now that even though these look like discrete steps, they're kind of iterative. You should be developing as you go through. Identify the key indicators to measure progress. You can look always at what GRI have done, but also you can look at Dow Jones's sustainability index. You can look at accountability, AA 1000. You can look at KLD, Domine Index, and the use of indicators. There are a lot of people who do indicators. You can even look at the Hopkins framework, which I have, and people have been using that one too. And I don't have time to go through that one today. But we can go back a little bit to indicators. Generally with indicators, there are three types of indicators: interval, ordinal, and nominal. It's best to try and use interval scale data if possible, because that's the best indicator. Which means, I'll give you an example of an interval scale is like height. It's a continuous variable. So you can be any height between 5'10" and 6 foot. We use meters in this country. 2 meters and 180. Whereas the next one, the ordinal scale, is like used in the Olympics. And, well, he's first, he's second, and third. So you get a gold medal and you get a silver medal. But the fact that in 100 meters dash, you might have done it in 3 seconds, it could really be a new world record, because the world record is about 9.8. And the second person came in at 9.9 seconds, you did it in 3 seconds. Well, you get a gold, he gets a silver, or she. It doesn't show how much difference it is between the two. And then the third scale is yes-no. And you saw in the critics questionnaire that most of them were like that. That's the weakest measurement, because you're not even saying that yes is better than no. So it's not even the kind of the Olympic standard, that you can't say that, yes is very much better than no. You like yes more. Go on to the next 11. Pretty important, cost and benefits. Your financial director wants to know.
Are these financial benefits or benefits?
In the presentation I was going to do yesterday, I was going to go through a number of the benefits. I'm going to do that this afternoon, so we can finish off the day on looking at that in some detail. I had a student of mine who did a thesis on this, and he actually works for an auditing company. And now he's my professor because he did such a damn good job as a student. We used him, and he tried to quantify the cost and benefits of CSR programs. It's actually a chapter in my textbook that I'm writing, and I can share that with you if people want to know how to actually get in using rate of return analysis, which I'm sure ROI analysis, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Is it something like an income statement?
Yeah, it is a little bit. He's done that. The thing is, you know, you auditor the things that you can measure, maybe not the most important things. But people have been doing things like risk management for a long time, even reputation management. You can see some people have come up with indicators. Some of this work is quite good in some of the literature. So all of a sudden, you're getting close to the frontiers of research in this area. So that's why so many companies have problems in this area, because a lot that we don't know, we're trying to find out. We know that CSR is good for reputation, but how do we measure it? And we also know that you can lose reputation very, very quickly. As you know, the famous expression by Warren Buffett, it takes 20 years to create reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it. So that's trying to do something cost and benefit. Now this last one, 15, is when I first started working on this, I wanted an exit strategy.
You skipped 12, 13, 14. Is that
Oh,
too
did I?
far?
Oh yeah, I did. I bloody have. Yeah, good point. Yes, number 12. Sorry, I skipped 12 as well. Implement the activity or program ensuring that it relates to other proposals in the pipeline. You see, you know, many companies and organizations are already doing CSR activities. And so there's no need to kind of reinvent the wheel. So this is also a good argument when you're trying to convince a CEO to start working in this area. You say, well, why don't you report on what we're doing now? This is what I've been doing with the football associations in Europe, especially some of the weaker ones, is actually, well, just say what you're doing. You know, I mean, putting barriers up to stop crowds crushing on each other, making sure that the referees are selected in a transparent way, using goal line technology so there's not cheating. So they're doing quite a lot of this already, but there are other things that they can do. And this is an ongoing process as well. 13, tell people what you're doing. So much you hear is that CSR is just PR.
Make noise.
Yeah. But any PR company or department that I've spoken to always say, we can only go so far. You know, we can't spin a company which is really doing disgraceful things, and we don't want to. So it's interesting that the PR communication department sometimes is a tail that wags the dog. So rather than people saying that the PR company, you're just putting a gloss on things, certainly to a certain extent they will. But after a bit, they don't like doing that very much. And you can criticize a lot of people, but 95% of people have got integrity when they work in integrity. They want to keep that in their lives. There's a whole discussion on personal responsibility, and most people want to be ethical. And they find it very difficult when they're not. Okay, if you were in a crowd of thieves and you join a crowd of thieves, it's easy to be a thief. I don't know, never haven't been a thief myself. I'm trying to avoid it. But certainly when you read all these Hollywood films and so on, you think everybody's a thief. But it's not so. The newspapers don't report on all the good things. Do they, Joe? Tell us why your newspaper never reported on all the good things that were happening. Okay, I'll say why. It doesn't make news. They can't sell newspapers,
People don't want to read it.
Yeah. So,
It's boring news.
yeah. Sad, isn't it? So I think we should try and develop new ways of reporting. For the O.J. Simpson affair. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, this is a guy, a famous football quarterback, who was accused of murdering his wife. And he got off it because one of his lawyers said, if the glove doesn't fit, then you must acquit. Yeah. Well, the district attorney, Gino Galcietti at that time, district attorney, lost the case. District attorneys in the state of Los Angeles are elected. So poor old Jill, after this trial, had to resign as district attorney. Anyway, the poor guy turned up on a platform with me at Webster University in St. Louis, a year or so ago. And he's turned into a photographer. And he goes around the world taking photographs of development projects. And he showed a whole nice set of pictures on tube wells and things in Benin and countries. And he met the president and so on and the rest of it. And then Michael Hopkins came on with his song and dance routine afterwards. And like I was still talking macro, meso, micro. And all Jill's photographs were micro projects. So I challenged him to take photos of the meso and macro level. Kind of boring, really, because taking pictures of institutional strengthening and institution and macro policy and the rest of it. How do you do that? But these are, to me, are crucial. That's why he lost the case. So finally, evaluate. So communication essential, and this sentence. Ensure that we can back this up with internal consistent practices, since it's a dangerous pitfall if it's not the case. And then evaluate the social responsibility proposals against costs and benefits. And lastly, develop an exit strategy. Now, I thought when I first worked on CSR that companies would get around to doing this in about 100 years. I'm amazed how rapidly, and we've seen a little bit this morning, how rapidly companies have gone along this path. Now, it occurs to me that as an exit strategy, in many ways, you should get, your CSR experts and your department and so on, it's not needed if you're doing all these things. But you still need to keep up with technology and measurement technology and so on. So in fact, I've actually put a rider on some of this, is that develop a longer-term exit strategy for your main CSR policies, but keep a small group which is continuing to monitor and so on. Yes, sir.
I'm not able to grasp what is the exit strategy.
Get out of it. Get out of the business.
Out of
you don't. When you're a CSR company and you're really doing all the right things, why do you need to keep on pushing it?
Is it because you've reached a dead end or something?
No, because you're doing all the right things and trying to move on.
Kind of evaluation process.
Yeah.